The moment they embarrassed me in front of everyone, I knew something was wrong. Not just with them. Not just with the room. With everything they were building. Because humiliation like that does not happen by accident. It happens when people believe they are safe. When they think their position is strong enough that no one can challenge them anymore. That night, they laughed at me like I didn't matter. Weeks later, their profits started disappearing. And by the time they understood why, it was already too late to fix anything. Stories like this are why people turn to exposed stories media. Not because embarrassment is dramatic. Because it often exposes the exact moment when confidence turns into blindness. And when that happens inside a business, the damage is never only personal. It always spreads. The company belonged to my uncle. But in reality, it belonged to the whole family. It was a mid-sized import and distribution business built over nearly 20 years. My uncle started it from nothing. My father joined later. My cousin Ryan eventually took over operations. By the time everything fell apart, the company had become more than just income. It was status. It was proof that our family had made it. That matters. Because once a business becomes identity, people stop questioning it honestly. They defend it emotionally. Ryan understood that perfectly. He was 2 years older than me and had grown up watching the business expand from a small warehouse operation into something much bigger. He didn't build it from the beginning, but he stepped in at the exact moment when growth looked inevitable. And that shaped how he thought. He believed success was permanent once it reached a certain level. He believed confidence was more important than caution. He believed momentum solved problems. At first, it looked like he was right. Revenue increased. Client lists expanded. Margins looked strong on paper. Our family treated him like a rising star. At gatherings, people asked him for advice. My uncle praised him openly. My father trusted his decisions without hesitation. I worked inside the company too. Not in leadership. Not in strategy. I handled internal reporting and vendor reconciliation. That meant I saw things other people didn't care to look at. Not because I was smarter, because I was closer to the details. That difference matters. Because businesses rarely collapse from one big mistake. They collapse from patterns no one wants to see early enough. The first time I noticed something off was in the supplier accounts. It was small. Payment timing inconsistencies. Minor delays. Nothing alarming on its own. But the pattern didn't match the story being told. Ryan kept talking about record performance. The numbers I saw suggested something tighter. Not failing, but stretched. That's an important distinction. A stretched business can still look successful. Until it isn't. I flagged it quietly. I asked about delayed payments. I asked about margin compression in certain product categories. I asked why some expenses were being pushed into later reporting periods. Ryan always had answers. Quick answers. Confident answers. He said it was normal. He said it was strategic timing. He said I was overanalyzing. That word again. Overanalyzing. That's what people say when they don't want to explain something fully. At first, I let it go. Because families work like that. You assume good intent. You assume someone closer to leadership sees a bigger picture. But over time, the gap grew. Revenue looked strong. Cash flow looked unstable. That mismatch doesn't fix itself. It grows. The event where everything broke happened at a company anniversary dinner. Not a small one. A big event. Clients, partners, extended family. A room full of people who believed in the company. Ryan stood at the center of it. Confident, relaxed, in control. He gave a speech about growth, about expansion, about how the company had never been stronger. People applauded. My uncle looked proud. My father smiled like everything we had built was secure. Then Ryan decided to make a joke. He looked at me across the room and said, "Every business needs someone who worries too much." People laughed. Not aggressively, just enough to set the tone. I forced a smile. That should have been the end. It wasn't. He kept going. He said, "My cousin here can find a problem in a perfect report." More laughter. This time louder, because now there was a target. Now the room understood the dynamic. I wasn't the one who kept things accurate. I was the one who slowed things down. Then my uncle added something. He said, "That's why we don't let him near big decisions." The room reacted again, and this time it hit differently, because now it wasn't a joke. It was positioning. I had been turned into a symbol, not of caution, of limitation. My father laughed too. That's what stayed with me. Not the clients, not the strangers, my own family. I stood there for a few seconds, letting it pass. Because when humiliation happens publicly, reacting immediately only makes it worse. But inside, something had already shifted. Because I knew something they didn't. The business wasn't as strong as they believed. And the confidence they were celebrating was built on assumptions that were already starting to fail. I left early. No confrontation, no explanation, just a quiet exit, because I understood something clearly for the first time. They weren't just laughing at me. They were rejecting the truth. And once a business starts rejecting truth, decline isn't a possibility. It's a timeline. The next morning, I opened every report I had saved. And I started looking again. Not as family, as evidence. Once I stopped treating the company like family, everything became clear. Not emotionally, structurally. That matters. Because emotion can hide patterns. Structure reveals them. The first issue was cash flow, not profit. Cash. On paper, the company looked strong. Revenue growth, expanding contracts, positive projections. But internally, the timing didn't align. Payments were being delayed, expenses were being shifted, and certain revenue entries were appearing earlier than they should have. None of it looked illegal immediately. That's what makes it dangerous. It looked manageable, until it wasn't. I started mapping everything. Not for the company, for myself. I tracked supplier delays. I tracked inventory movement. I tracked when money was supposed to arrive versus when it actually did. And the pattern became obvious. The company was using timing to create the appearance of stability. But underneath, pressure was building. That's when I realized something important. Ryan didn't misunderstand the numbers. He was managing perception. There's a difference, and that difference changes everything. A few days later, a supplier called me. He asked a simple question. "Are payments going to be late again this month?" That question told me everything, because suppliers don't ask that unless it's already happened more than once. I asked how many times. He gave me dates. They matched exactly with the gaps I had already seen. That confirmed it. This wasn't random. It was consistent. And consistency means structure. I asked Ryan again. Not publicly. Privately. I told him cash flow was tightening and asked if we needed to adjust projections. He didn't get angry. He got dismissive. He said, "You focus too much on short-term movement." That answer is dangerous, because short-term movement becomes long-term collapse when ignored. I didn't argue, because by then I understood something. He didn't want correction. He wanted confidence. And those two things don't always exist at the same time. The first visible crack came 2 weeks later. A shipment was delayed. Not a small one, a major one tied to one of our biggest clients. That created a chain reaction. Late delivery, client pressure, revenue delay. The company explained it as logistics issues. That's what businesses do. They simplify problems publicly. But internally, the effect was clear. Cash tightened further. Then another issue appeared. One of our mid-level clients reduced their order volume unexpectedly. That wasn't public, but it mattered, because the company's projections depended on steady demand growth. And that assumption was already breaking. I documented everything, not to expose anyone, to understand the truth. Because once I saw the full pattern, one thing became undeniable. The business wasn't failing suddenly. It had already started failing before the party. The difference was timing. The laughter happened at the peak of confidence. The decline started immediately after. Not because of karma, because reality doesn't wait for people to accept it. A week later, the financial reports changed. Subtly, margins adjusted. Language softened. Projections rephrased. That's how companies signal trouble without saying it directly. Then came the moment no one could ignore. Quarterly profit numbers dropped. Not slightly, noticeably, not catastrophic, but enough to break the narrative. My uncle stopped talking about expansion. My father stopped repeating success stories. Ryan stopped joking. That's when everything shifted. Because now, the truth wasn't something I was saying. It was something the numbers were showing. And numbers don't care about family dynamics. They don't care who laughed. They don't care who was confident. They just reveal. That's when Ryan called me. Not casually, seriously. He asked if I had seen the reports. I said yes. Then he asked what I thought. That question came too late. Because now it wasn't about prevention. It was about damage control. I told him the same thing I had been saying for months. Cash flow instability, overextended projections, misaligned timing. He listened, for the first time. But listening late doesn't reverse early decisions. That's the part people don't understand. You don't fix problems at the moment they appear publicly. You fix them at the moment they first become visible privately. He had ignored that moment. Now, the company had to face the consequences. And those consequences were just beginning. The decline didn't happen all at once. It unfolded slowly. That's what made it worse. Because every week, the company lost something. Not just money, confidence, clients, stability. The first major loss came from a long-term partner. They reduced their contract. Quietly. No announcement. But internally, it hit hard. Because it confirmed what I already knew. Trust was weakening. And once trust weakens in business, everything else follows. Then suppliers started tightening terms. Shorter payment windows. Less flexibility. More pressure. That created even more strain on cash flow. A cycle. A predictable one. The kind I had tried to warn about months earlier. Ryan worked harder. Longer hours. More meetings. More calls. But effort doesn't fix structural problems. It only delays them. My uncle changed too. He became quieter. Less certain. Because for the first time, he was seeing something he hadn't wanted to believe. That success had been partly built on assumptions that no longer held. My father stopped defending the company. That was the biggest change. Because for years, he believed confidence was enough. Now, he was watching it fail. And that forces perspective. One evening, he came to me and said something simple. "You saw this coming." Not as an accusation, as realization. I nodded. Not because I wanted to be right, because by then, being right didn't matter anymore. The damage was already done. Ryan and I had one final conversation. He didn't apologize immediately. He explained. That's what people do when they still want to control the narrative. He said he believed the company could grow out of the pressure. He said confidence was necessary to keep momentum. He said if he showed doubt, everything would have collapsed faster. Then he said something that ended everything between us. I couldn't let you slow things down. That was the truth. Not misunderstanding. Not miscalculation. Choice. He chose speed over stability, image over accuracy. And he chose to make me the symbol of what he didn't want to hear. I told him something he didn't expect. That the moment he embarrassed me wasn't the problem. The problem was that he needed to do it. Because once someone needs to silence caution publicly, they already know the truth privately. He didn't argue, because by then, he understood. The business didn't collapse completely, but it changed. Smaller, weaker, less trusted, and most importantly, no longer unquestioned. The family changed too. Less confident, more careful, more aware, because now they had seen what happens when confidence replaces truth. Stories like this are why exposed stories media exists. Because behind every public success, there is always a private reality. And sometimes, the moment people laugh at the truth is the exact moment they guarantee their own downfall. If there is one lesson in this story, it is this. Pay attention to who gets embarrassed in a room full of confidence, because that person is often the only one willing to say what others are afraid to hear. And when that voice is dismissed, the consequences don't come immediately, but they always come. And when they do, they don't ask who was laughing. They just take everything that was built on the lie, and they leave nothing behind but the truth people tried to ignore.